Welcome to Utah Stories. So today I'm joined by Michael Valentine, who's gotten a lot of press lately. You kind of
Sure.
found a way to get a lot of press.
It wasn't my intention. So,
Really?
No, I was just trying to, keep our store safe from folks and, keep our patrons safe. And this whole thing went kind of viral with.
I was kind of intrigued by your original statement, which I'll go into.
Sure.
But before we get into it, describe what's happened to the hate that you've received over basically deciding your bar's not anti-Zionist. How do you put it, basically?
Yeah, and then real quick before we jump into it, always good to be back on the show. I just had to tell you too. Every time I talk to Dr. Cornel West now, he's like, "How's our radio friend doing?" I'm like, "He's good, Dr. West." So I just had to give a shout out and a hi from Cornel
He's such
West
a great
to you,
guy,
man. So,
man. What an awesome dude.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I get a lot of comments that's still that they really liked our segment together on Utah Stories with me and Dr. West. So a lot of fun. So
yeah, so you keep in touch with him.
Yeah,
too.
Hopefully he'll come back and we'll have him back on.
Yeah,
and
that'd be
we'll do
awesome.
a follow up. So, but yeah, so this I own a bar. It's called Weathered Waves, and I also own a cider company, which is 10 years old this year. We're celebrating our 10th year. Kind of started the farmers markets. I make ciders and non-alcoholic, sparkling, and hard cider, and then we've turned the spot into a bar recently. We just got our bar license. I was working on it for a while, but then I was running for mayor and got delayed on that. And during the campaign when Dr. West came out, we had a rally, and it was after October, a lot of conversation about Palestine. So the rally we had with Dr. West here, it was like basically stacked with Palestinians, gave them a voice and a platform to talk about what was going on. And then since the election, I've been very, organized with the Palestinians in solidarity with them. We've been doing rallies after rallies. You've probably seen all kinds of, events going on, marches and vigils and a bunch of stuff. And then we also were working on a ceasefire resolution that I helped write with the Palestinians. We met with Victoria and Alejandro of the city council. We were trying to get them to adopt the ceasefire resolution. And then, they took our resolution. This was like a formal resolution, too. So we went online to the website and petitioned it. So we were like the petitioners of this resolution. It was like ours. And then we had a great meeting with Victoria and Alejandro. Then the next city council meeting, they didn't have our resolution. They completely butchered it and did a resolution for peace that didn't mention Palestine, didn't mention genocide, didn't mention Gaza at all, didn't mention anything that was going on. The resolution that we wrote was modeled very similar to the Chicago resolution that was passed, basically talking about factual statements about the UN and the ICJ and the justice courts and everything that's going on, attacks on journalists and hospitals and doctors and war crimes and these sorts of things. And it was wild because at this meeting, it was actually this one here, February 20th. All these Zionists showed up, and I believe they were all invited by the city council, kind of like both siding this situation. And during the meeting, they were defaming us. They said we were inciting violence, just blatant statements. This is this rabbi, Utah rabbi here. He's talking about, he's just openly mocking keffiyehs, which is a Palestinian, artifact, like a garb, which is a hate crime. It'd be very similar to mocking a yarmulke, And then he calls us all a pro-terror mob. And there's this situation where these city council meetings we were going to, and each of these meetings ends with the police escorting us out and treating us very differently than they're treating these Zionist rabbis that show up. I honestly think that the Palestinians have a massive discrimination suit against the entire city right now for the way we've been treated, and also they've been violating other situations where we had that resolution. They violated the Open Public Meetings Act by not giving us a copy of the resolution before they passed it, with, transparency. And then also...
yeah, that's the thing I absolutely cannot believe. They took away the ability to comment on the public meetings.
This is what's crazy.
Because of you, basically.
Yeah, because
right?
of
trying to say,
we've
let's pass a resolution.
Yeah, and the resolution is a ceremonial resolution. It's non-binding. I think it's not even political to say hey.
Were you guys vocal in these meetings? Were you all getting up and talking or what?
Yeah, everyone was speaking, and like,
So you were taking a lot of the time.
Yeah, but there's also our civic right to, like, everyone has 2 minutes to speak about whatever they want, So someone could go up there and be like, hey, we're disappointed with the trash cans in Salt Lake being yellow instead of blue or something. Everyone has the civic right and the First Amendment right to go speak in these meetings and talk to their representatives and the elected officials about whatever they want. And there's these interesting rules of decorum that apparently, apply to the community, but not to the officials. So like they got mad at us for like snapping our fingers or like clapping or booing or stuff like that. They said it was intimidation. But at the same time, the council is sitting up there on their phones. They're not paying attention. They're looking at like whatever they want. It's extremely rude, And then they literally flee the scene before, at the end of the meetings instead of sitting and talking to, the community and having a dialogue. And it's like, where's the respect for the community as an elected official to serve the public and to listen to the public? It's just not there. We know this. It's not been there for years, not just on this issue, but across the board on every issue. And it's very concerning. And to the point where, the city council and the mayor had an opportunity to condemn genocide and make Salt Lake City a place for, to lead the way, especially as we're going to the Olympics. In this meeting, I put into the record the copy of the report that the city did for the Olympics. It talks all about human rights and abuses and like why the Olympics should come here. But instead of condemning genocide, and the city council and the mayor have gone into fascism and authoritarianism by shutting down public comments and discriminating against Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims instead of and to them.
Yeah.
So this has kind of been building up until the point where, I have Palestinian customers that come to the bar, and I didn't want people to come in and be like saying, hey, there's no genocide going on. Our space has already been a safe space for trans folks. We, have queer folks come in. We just have a very wide gamut of customers. And that was the idea of like expanding our hate speech policies to keep everyone safe in the store, in the bar.
So why do you think this has become such a divisive issue where if you're on the right, it seems, you're pro-Zionist, pro-Jewish settlement, pro-right to defend themselves after the October 8th terrorist attack. But if you're on the left, it just seems like everybody on that side is pro-Palestinian, calling it a genocide, and pro the idea that this is very, very awful, unfair, inhumane what the Jewish people are doing when they didn't start it. I mean, it's just I try to look at both sides of it.
Sure.
And when the United States the buildings flew into the World Trade Center, we had to go on a war footing, right, to defend ourselves from future terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
Why is it the Jewish people are not able to do that, or you're not even able to say that without being considered pro-Jew, anti-Palestinian? I mean, what's made this so black and white?
Yeah, and I actually would argue that it's not black and white, and I guess my response to that is twofold. First of all, I don't think this is a political issue at all. I don't think so either.
I don't think why is it? I mean, it just seems like that's the way it's come to be.
Well, exactly. I think when we talk about politics, Democrats, Republicans, left and right, I think most of the time, we can agree that like we're all Americans or we're all, of the same cloth.
And we should all be for not killing millions or
we're
thousands of people, innocent victims.
Exactly. We're all brothers and sisters and stuff. So like we can have disagreements on particular things, like where we should be putting our money to. I always talk about, we can debate a lot of things, we can argue, but the thing we won't argue about is other people's humanity. I think whether you're Democrat or Republican, independent, libertarian, wherever you are, we can all collectively agree that genocide is bad. Human rights abuses are terrible things that we should all speak out against. I don't think it's political to condemn genocide.
The only thing that I'd push back on that with is you have in war collateral damage.
Sure.
And it's an awful thing that anytime there's a war, there's going to be innocent people who die.
Yeah.
And anytime one nation commits an act of war against another nation, most of the people who end up dying are not the soldiers who are in the
Sure.
battle are
The big distinction here is that Palestine has no army, they have no navy, they have no military whatsoever. So this isn't a traditional war, and you know, there isn't like troops on the ground battling, you know, like
but they have Hamas who committed the acts of terror.
Sure,
on
but they're
October
also, we have to look at who Israel is targeting. They're targeting journalists, they're targeting doctors, they're blowing up hospitals. Yes.
Well, the hospitals are on top of the terror networks, right?
A lot of this been debunked. So
Well,
like
I don't know that this is the place I want to take
Sure,
the debate.
sure.
It's more like it's more like I'd like to look at it in broad terms,
Yeah.
because we're not boots on the ground. We're not witnessing.
Well, I can tell you this too. Like, you know, we have things in place to clarify what genocide is, what war crimes are. We have the Geneva Conventions. You're not allowed to target disabled people, children, civilians,
and
doctors.
what's happening now in Rafah, there should be a ceasefire.
Right.
We 100% agree. There
Yeah.
should be a mechanism for the Palestinian people to separate from the Hamas militants.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that mechanism doesn't exist. And then in the north, where the Hezbollah is firing rockets into Israel, I don't know. You know, I don't know what should happen there, but obviously the Israel people are moving out.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick on your question. You know, we have these things in place to classify what war crimes and genocide are. That's why the International Court of Justice is, you know, looking into this matter. They're also fascinating enough. They're looking into the claims on genocide. They're also looking into the claims of Israel illegally occupying Palestine as an apartheid state going back decades. And that's kind of the second point I was going to say to this too. This didn't start on October 7th.
Yeah.
You know, like with September 11th, it also didn't start on that. You know, America has decades-long history of CIA assassinating leaders, destabilizing democracies all over the place. So, like, you know, to quote Malcolm X, there's this, you know, the chickens come home to roost. If we're going around the world imperializing things, doing things, things will come back to us. And it's important to recognize, again, that this didn't start in October of 2023, that Israel is considered an apartheid state, has been occupying Palestine, has been oppressing, and there's a long line of documentation to, you know, for these claims of what's been going on to the people of Palestine.
Yeah, and the big huge debate around this stems back from some comments we got on Borders.
Yeah.
It's like, who owns land?
Right.
And why should anybody
Yeah.
claim right to have land?
Right.
And so that's a big question we're going to answer next week, but I wanted to delve into it a little bit.
And it goes right into Zionism.
Yeah,
what
so
we're talking about.
Zionism,
Yeah.
we live in Zion.
Yeah.
We came here, Mormon pioneers. A lot of my ancestors came with their
Right.
hand carts. They
Yeah.
settled here. This wasn't exactly empty.
Of course not.
This
yeah.
land was occupied by Ute
Yeah.
Indians, Shoshone Indians, Paiutes. But so it's like I kind of get how in the modern era in the 21st century, you could say you should never claim you have rights to other people's land, but it happens all the time. It's just like warfare and people taking action to occupy other folks' land or say that they should have right. Like I come from Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia are in this giant battle there over this land, and it's ancient land. Who really should have it? I don't know enough about it to understand it, but I know the Azerbaijanis were blockading the ability for the Armenians to get food because they wanted that land. And but it's like we're here in Salt Lake, they're over there in Israel and Gaza. How can we say we know enough about it to know who should have the land and who shouldn't?
I think these are directly connected, you know. So when we talk about Zionism, and especially the difference between Judaism and Zionism, one of the reasons, you know, people are so mad at me, and they think that I'm banning Jews, which of course I'm not doing. I haven't violated any protected classes we've had Jewish customers in the store this entire month that were celebrating our ban on Zionism that are anti-Zionist Jews.
And I know there's a lot of Jews in Jerusalem right now protesting Benjamin Netanyahu, and they're calling it genocide.
There's a whole amazing group of these Orthodox Jewish guys and folks out there that are refusing to be part of the IDF. They're refusing military service. Very brave. So and I support them. But like the idea of Zionism is this: it's a religious idea. That God gave us the right to this land, and we have a right to come do whatever we want, and that's what they're using that to then justify apartheid, oppression, genocide, war crimes. And what's fascinating about this is we understand that because we're in Zion right here too. It's the exact same story of what happened here. With pioneers going out west, manifest destiny, which is a religious idea. God gave us it's our duty to go west and claim this land. And Brigham Young here in the history of Mormonism, Bear River Massacre, the battle with the Timpanogos tribe, which is completely wiped out. Yeah, Mountain Meadows Massacre. The way that we've treated tribes, and again, it's not just Mormons,
But Mountain Meadows, just for fairness, was against
other
group
pioneers. Yeah, not indigenous folks, but I believe they dressed up as indigenous folks.
The people, when they committed the so-called atrocity, the Mormons dressed up as
Indians. But we had the Killers of the Flower Moon movie come out. The whole history of the West is a history of broken treaties and smallpox blankets and oppression and what the decimation of tribes that exist right now today, with indigenous folks, Native Americans being quite possibly the most disenfranchised people in the country, where reservations still don't have water, still don't have electricity. They're just barely getting voting rights and stuff.
Yeah.
So that oppression continues on, and
but what do we do about that? Should we give the land back to Native Americans?
I think
who deserves the land?
That's a whole big conversation right there, and it's already playing out with Supreme Court cases where broken treaties and land is being returned to tribes. There's a huge case right now with almost half of Oklahoma, going back to tribes that was a broken treaty, and that land was annexed illegally and a bunch of other stuff too. So, that's kind of the idea with Landback. You hear people talk about Landback, which is the idea of, returning land to indigenous folks. And when we say Landback, it's not just, for American tribes. That's what, it applies to Palestine as well.
But then should my ancestors from Armenia get their land back from the Ottoman Turks?
Yeah, and I think, the idea is to look at each situation. I mean, we're a big world and a lot of cultures, right? These situations are very...
The reason I bring it up, the Mormon pioneer situation, my ancestors from Armenia, my ancestors came here when my great-grandmother's entire family was slaughtered. They lost all their land. They lost their home. They lost everything.
Right.
She came out here. Now it's occupied by who knows who.
Right.
But could I go back and get that house back that she lived in? Could I get my great-grandfather's house back? My point is, there's so many complicated land disputes that are so often resolved at the point of a gun.
Yeah.
And who's going to be the world police to say you need to leave because these people have more rights to this land or this home than you do?
Well, in terms of Israel and Palestine, that's exactly the history of it. They talk about a land for people from people without a land or whatever. That the quote of Israel, and there was already people there though was the issue of Palestine.
And they had that land, 400 years prior.
Yeah, and if we go back
like
into, the history of this with the Balfour Declaration from England, I don't know if you're aware of that, but Britain and, the Western powers just basically hey, here's the land, and they just, it's a history of imperialism and other countries having the rights to go dominate other countries, and it plays directly with, colonialism.
Well, it also plays to post-World War II, 10 million Jews slaughtered in concentration camps.
Yeah.
They were scattered all over Eastern Europe, and then with the formation of Israel sanctioned by the United States, you had Zionism.
Yeah.
You had massive...
But the history gets whitewashed, America turned ships around with Jewish refugees on them. I believe Anne Frank's father was on one of those ships. And wildly enough, Palestine was one of the only countries that accepted Jewish refugees with open arms, during these times. There's pictures and passports, documentation of, Jewish refugees in Palestine that were, accepted and brought into Palestine. And it's just this fascinating.
And they were they were welcome to the United States too. Like you look at New York and Brooklyn, there's more ascetic Jews in Brooklyn than there are I believe in
right.
most of Eastern Europe. And it's just it's just such a complicated issue, such a big issue.
I think the big issue is, about just what you said, going around and taking people's land at gunpoint. I don't think in the age of 2024 that's acceptable.
But my greater point is, you look at the mass migration in the United States, you look at what's going on, how all these people want to come here. I've been examining the question, why do so many people want to be here? And I'll tell you what I've come to,
Sure.
the conclusion I've come to. Here in the United States, you are able to have very, very secure private property rights. And your private property is sanctioned by the government. It's protected by all the government powers.
Right.
Nobody can come and just take it from you.
Unless the government wants to.
Eminent domain. Yeah, that happened to my grandpa. But I could say, even in those cases, they will compensate you for your land, probably not enough.
Sure.
But that is probably the most secure right we have as American citizens. And to be able to use that as the ability to build equity, build
Right.
independent wealth,
Right.
have a free speech platform like I've been able to do here,
Sure.
mostly because I paid off a house.
Yeah, and I think
10 years
that's
ago.
all well and good, but it's also important to recognize the history and the reality that is built on, supremacy, slavery, colonialism. Like,
But there was slavery everywhere in the
right.
world.
Well, I'm talking about there's posters of from America back in the 1800s, like telling pioneers to go take this land from Native Americans. And, there's a phrase that black folks always like to talk about, 40 acres and a mule, that, promises of land and things after slavery that were never met. So it's the talking about America is that, some people have these rights when others do not. And in the newspaper recently, real quick, some of these local rabbis were defining Zionism as the right to let me look it up just so I'm not butchering it, but the right to self-determination for Jewish people and the right for Israel to exist. And those things are two mutually exclusive things, right? Of course, Jewish folks have the right to self-determination, but the real conversation needs to be about how come Palestinians don't have that right to self-determination. Gaza is known as the largest open-air prison in the world, and it has been for a long time.
Yeah.
And with an apartheid state in Israel, Palestinians have different rights. They're treated very, very differently than Israelis who have more rights. And so that's the question that you kind of brought up. How come some people get these rights and some other people's don't? And then real quick too, the idea of America being one of the largest bullies in the world, going around and conquering all these places. Right now, America is giving Israel all these weapons. We are committing genocide. The blood is on our hands. Our tax dollars are paying for this. This is like finding out, we're funding Nazis during World War II, and we had American bankers that did that as well. But America has a long list of crimes against humanity, and so that's kind of what's the reckoning of what's going on with Israel and Palestine right now. Is it's changing. It's like kind of showing the light on what America actually is doing and what we are.
Well, I wouldn't dispute that at all. Our military-industrial complex is and our CIA is basically the world supreme policeman, and they determine who's in power, who's not. That we are going around the world policing who's
like a couple days ago,
we are the arbiter of power.
The UN passed that ceasefire resolution. America abstained from the vote. That's like all the UN folks in that, they have to follow that resolution. So right now, America and Israel is not following that. We are rogue states in terms of the UN. And also with the International Justice Court that has demanded, aid going into Gaza and all these things. So again, here's the question. How come America gets to just do whatever it wants around the whole world? and we have the power to become a rogue state.
I don't believe we should have that power.
Exactly.
So I believe that, I hope that we get a person into a high office who wants to dismantle the CIA, who wants to stop the military-industrial complex. I would love to see that. But in the meantime, my greater point is this.
Yeah.
If private property did not exist in the United States, do you think we would be the world supreme leader of the free world? I mean, do you think the West would have become what it is without private property rights?
I mean, I think that's an interesting argument. I think there's a lot more to it than that, with industrialism and America being a melting pot of ideas and innovation and like bringing all these benefits and, having
because we attracted all the intellectuals here because we gave people freedom and rights, both rights and freedom.
Yeah, and I think that's I definitely think I'd put property rights is something. I think it's more has to do with the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights, which I think is important. And I mean, it's good to talk about too that our Constitution hasn't really been updated in a long time. A lot of other developed nations or other nations with
we have amendments. I mean, you can amend the Constitution.
Well, other nations have completely rewritten their constitutions and like.
That's what you think we ought to do?
Well, I mean, I think we should improve it. When the Constitution was written, it was written by white slave owners.
Who wanted slavery abolished. I mean,
well, some of them did.
Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, but he also, there's a lot of history there with what he did with his slaves and his,
But there's a lot of stuff, details related to those conflicts that I think, people who are in the midst of it can probably debate better. But my point is, it's like I see a lot of people on the left who basically, it just looks like to me, they just think America is a bad place. The United States is a bad country, and they don't believe like the American dream exists anymore. Do you subscribe to that?
I think the big way I would put it would be for human rights. I think human rights are the most important thing. I think they're more important than countries existing. The folks talking about Zionism, they're saying, hey, Israel has a right to exist. Well, actually it doesn't, no country has the right to exist, but people do have a right to human rights no matter what country they're in.
So if you're in Mexico and you say, what's the Argentina, that MS-14, is that where those gang members come from? It was taken, that country had to really crack down on the gangs. How can you say you're living in that country, human rights are our most important right if you don't have the power or the capability to protect people?
Right, but that's the kind of the whole point of like the UN, the International Justice Courts, and the Geneva Conventions. Human rights transcend borders; they transcend barriers.
But it takes money to have those rights.
Well, sure, and that's the problem. Is what we were just talking about with white supremacy. Some people having rights and based on your skin color, or based on your gender or whatever, So that's the conversation. But like, I think it's important to frame it in that way. Israel, they talk about it having a right to exist. It's not even 100 years old. America is not that old. We have Guinness in the bar. It's older than America is. But like, so would your end goal be no borders? I mean, what? Well, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think that's the point of having it on
because then how could you protect anybody? You just have anarchy. That's my point. It's like, how
I don't
do you
think
protect
it's anarchy.
How do you protect anybody from just, if we have no borders, then you have no tax-based structure to provide the services that people need for protection.
Well, that's not exactly what no borders means.
How do you stop anybody from just coming in here taking this building?
I mean, we can have a world without borders and still have independent cultures and, different nationalities and things.
If you didn't have things like protection of your citizens as being one of the key tenets of that country or that that nation state.
Well, look at Europe for a great example. They have their countries, they have their cultures, they have their identities and all these amazing things, different languages and food and customs and all these things. But there's a free flowing society there where people can hop on the train and go to like 5 countries, and it's like a borderless kind of.
Well, I mean, there's still
system.
countries, though.
That's
I
what
mean,
I'm
there's
saying,
still
though, but that
the borders define
yeah.
who pays taxes where and what.
Well, I guess we talks about. We should probably define what we mean by borderless. To me, that just means like free flowing people and commerce.
Like the EU.
Yeah, or just like of not letting folks migrate, and we're nomadic people. Humans are. We came from tribes and we wandered around and stuff. And fascinating argument you can make too is that. In a weird way, we have even less rights than we did back then, because we could travel around and we could go find another forest or a tree. We could go sit by a lake, and like the band of people could move around. Mm-hmm. Now, in America, across the whole country, they're arguing if homeless people even have a right to exist in public, which of course they do. And they have a constitutional right to exist in public without being thrown in jail or chased off through abatements, that you've talked about a lot.
Well, I need to have you back on, because it's such a huge topic.
Yeah.
and I know we could talk about homelessness, but I promised Allegra this would be like 10 or 15 minutes. But,
no problem. And then, so like just, kind of summing up the idea of this whole thing with Zionism, mm-hmm. My attorney and we met with an investigator for the Attorney General last week. My bar was reported to DABS, the Department of Alcohol.
Which I found unbelievable.
Well, the thing about this too is like the DABS didn't even contact me. They didn't even reach out to me. They just published that statement. And I thought it was just straight off shooting off the hip. We didn't discriminate. And in one of the recent Tribune articles, they even doubled down and said we take violations and grave violations from licensees that have bar licenses seriously. And I'm like, what violation? Please point to what we violated, because when we met with the investigator, the Attorney General, they're quoting this Utah Code 1373, which is basically, just kind of an extension of the Civil Rights Act, 1964. Talks about without discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, pregnancy, religion, ancestry, or national origin. And when we met with them, my attorney and we were pointing to this. We said, please, tell us what we violated. Tell us which one of these classes Zionism is. Is it pregnancy? Is it a race? Is it color? Is it religion? It's none of these, because Zionism is an ideology. And what's funny is like even in some of these articles where they're quoting some of these local rabbis, they're even themselves calling it an ideology and
mm-hmm.
a political belief.
Well, if you add the caveat, Jewish people are welcome here. Yeah. All people from Israel are welcome here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to say I'm excluding you if you are a Zionist, I honestly cannot see how that is discriminatory. That's like saying I don't want you in my bar if you're a Republican, basically, right?
Right, and it's like, to take it even a step further, I've told the the news and the interviews I've done elsewhere. Nobody, this wouldn't have gone viral if I said I was banning Nazis and like Nazism. Everyone understands that like Nazis is an extremist group, the KKK. These people do not represent Christianity as a mm-hmm. whole, the same way that Zionism doesn't represent, Judaism as a whole. And there's a lot of Jewish folks that are anti-Zionist. So it's, I think it's fascinating how this is kind of played out, but I think it's important because right now, around the country, folks are getting, attacked. Free speech is being, clamped down on. Mm-hmm. I've had, Israeli disinformation campaign bots like attacking me and things, and they're trying to criticize and stop any public, comments on Israel, like war crimes, what's going on, in a weird way. Like, I'm not Israeli, I'm an American, mm-hmm. I talk even worse about my country for what's going on that I have a right to do. We'll talk about the good and the bad things and hold our country accountable. But yet somehow I'm trying to be censored and being attacked and being silenced, having my bar license threatened and my business threatened, because I'm criticizing another country for what it's doing to, people around the world.
And that's just insane. That's just crazy. You have a right to your private business to have who you want in it, and I don't even think that you question people when they walk in your bar. Are you a Zionist? Do they?
No,
you? So
absolutely not.
And if they look like Zionists, do you ask them, are you a Zionist?
No, and it's not about that. So it's about keeping our other patrons safe. like trying to create a safe space and having a bar.
Do you fear Zionists in your bar?
No, I don't fear them. I'm trying to keep people safe. And it's the same thing with transphobia, with homophobia, with literally, white supremacist Nazis showing up. like if I have a trans customer or a Palestinian customer, someone's in there, like for example, I have a friend from Gaza who's lost family, uncles, aunts, cousins. You know, obviously it's keeping them safe, but it's also just like keeping them like safe from violence, but also like folks coming in there and saying, hey, there's no genocide going on, you know, when his family has been wiped out in the last 4 months.
Yeah.
That's a concern to me, and that's something, you know, I'm not going to put up with. And it's not just about this issue, but about any issue. It's like, you know, as a business, to me, it's not about the money or the products or whatever. The number one thing is keeping our customers safe, keeping a safe space in there so people can come and feel respected. And like the low bar of entry is to like, hey, you have to respect the humanity of the other patrons in this establishment. I think that's not too much to ask for, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I could think of a lot more questions to ask you, but we got to head out.
Sure.
Thanks for coming on, Michael. Really appreciate it. It's always fun having you on.
Yeah.
And we'll keep tabs on what's going on with you, and I wish you the best of luck. I certainly hope you don't lose your bar license. That would be horrible.
Yeah, I don't think I will. I don't think they have any standing, but do we want to talk about the Pantages as well? We don't have time.
I just told Allegra she could get out of here.
Okay.
We had to go to press today,
okay.
So, but we'll have you back to talk about Pantages for sure. Okay. Thanks,
Thanks,
you so
man.
much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.